There we go. So welcome to the Town of Stratford's International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination event. Thank you to everyone who's joining us here this evening and those who may view afterwards. We acknowledge that the land upon which we gather is the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, and we pay our respects to the Indigenous Mi'kmaq people of this territory, past, present, and future. My name is Wendy Watts. I'm the Community and Business Engagement Manager with the Town of Stratford, and part of what falls under my role is our diversity and inclusion work that we're very proud of in the Town of Stratford, and pleased to bring this event to you tonight. We are joining virtually, and hopefully by next year we will be able to be in person on March 21st. It's always been an important date for us in the town to put on some kind of an event or activity and help to raise awareness and educate and further our own learning and experiences on this topic. With that, I would like to thank the Black Cultural Society of PEI. Tamara Steele is here with us for coming on board tonight with us. And Chef Tara Reeves will be coming on screen here momentarily to do some cooking with us, and really want to thank both of them for partnering with the town on this and helping us to bring this tonight to you. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Chef Tara Reeves. I'm going to let her introduce herself, but I did want to say that from the moment I reached out to her a few weeks ago about doing some kind of an activity for tonight, she was so enthusiastic and excited and just willing to do whatever it takes. And I just want to say thank you for that positive response and for working with us to do this tonight. We're really excited and looking forward to a great evening.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me. It's my pleasure, and happy to be here with all of you tonight. And thanks to Tamara for coming to join us. So as you've seen, we're going to cook a recipe tonight. And the idea behind this, and kind of on the theme of what we're doing this evening, is I wanted to bring you something that you're semi-familiar with. You can see some of these ingredients probably look like they belong in a chili recipe, but the twist is that perhaps many of you haven't worked with this ingredient, which is a plantain. So we're going to bring the two together. It's going to be a little spicy, it's going to be a little smoky, and it's going to be great. So follow along. I'm not sure if you've prepped your items beforehand or if you're going to kind of cook with us. But as Wendy said, if there's anything you'd like to know, just type it in the chat and I can answer it on screen for you. And if I'm moving too fast or anything like that, just pop in the chat and let me know, and I'll slow things down. So the first thing I want to do with you is show you how to work with this. So as you can see, it probably looks like a banana. It is not a banana, it's a plantain. And it does have a similar texture to a banana, but the flavor is that of a potato. And I want to say it's that of a sweet potato, but not the orange sweet potato. Think of if a white potato was kind of sweet, is what this tastes like. And this is a very common ingredient in the Caribbean, in the African diaspora, places from Cuba to Puerto Rico, Afro-Latin cultures. This is a staple in that cuisine. So tonight I want to show you how to work with it. So the first thing we're going to do, you're just going to go ahead and cut off both ends. Just a straight cut. And as you can see, it does look like a banana on the inside there. And on your board, not like how I'm doing this in my hand, you're just going to take your knife and run it on either side of the 3 seams that you see on here. And then we're just going to peel those layers off one by one. So carefully go ahead and make your slice. And you'll notice the skin's pretty thick. And basically what I'm going to do is just go in with my paring knife and pull that right off. It is a little bit tough, and you might have to kind of work at it a little bit, but you'll see it comes right off. So you can go ahead and peel that, and then I'll show you the size of the cut that we're going to do on this. Plantain is one of my absolute favorite foods. Tamara and I were chatting a little bit earlier, and there's just so many different ways to eat it. And I feel like everyone that I talk to about plantain has their own favorite way of how they like to eat it. I think probably tostones is one of my favorites. And also just plantain chips, like sliced really thin, with like a nice dip and a nice seasoning. It tastes pretty much just like potato chips. So we're just gonna go
For
ahead.
something that just seems as plain as like you said, it looks like a banana, but it's so
Yeah.
versatile. So I've had them as like sweet, more like dessert style, and you have them savory, more like you said, like the chips or something, and or
Totally.
fried.
Yeah,
Even a little thicker is like really nice.
Totally. Yep. There's so many different things you can do with this. Bake them, fry them again, double fry them and make tostones.
And I love that you
All
chose
right.
the plantain too, because it really is kind of a food that unites the diaspora, right?
Yes, totally agree. Totally agree. All right, so we're gonna get this out of the way. And we're just gonna go ahead and cut this in about 1/2 inch thick rounds. Nothing fancy. And that's another thing I love about plantain is just, it's not meant to be, this isn't, you know, Michelin star ingredients. This is just home cooked, good comfort food. So I'll give you an idea. You want just kind of 1/2 inch or so, because we're gonna wanna brown each side, but we still want it to have a little bit of texture to it. So it's not gonna completely melt in the stew, right? So you can just go ahead and cut that into your rounds. And then once you've got that done, we're just gonna go ahead and get some oil hot in a pan. I've got a kind of large, deep frying pan here, and this is just a 1-pot dish, but the reason I'm using this is because it's nonstick. So we're gonna be very careful. This is gonna be a disclaimer. You will get a little bit of splatter. It's like frying anything, right? If you fry potatoes, you're gonna get a bit of splatter in the pan, right? So one thing to note, please be very careful. If you're using utensils or whatever it might be to stir it, make sure it's dry. Any water that touches that oil is going to splatter, and that's what we're not trying to do today. So you can go ahead and get your pan hot, and you want probably a medium heat. Too not hot enough and it's going to stick, and too hot, of course, it's going to burn. And you're going to burn the outside, and then the inside's not going to be cooked at all. And you'll notice in the recipe too, you want to reserve a little bit of cooking oil, because once we go ahead and fry the plantain, we're going to take them out, and then we're going to add in our onions and garlic to saute. So you're going to need a little bit of oil for that as well. So you can go ahead and get your oil nice and hot. Of course, not too hot that it's smoking. Never want smoking oil. But hot enough that you're going to get some brown on the first drop in the pan, basically. So I'm just going to go ahead and test my oil. And we don't have much of a sizzle, so I'm just going to increase that heat a little bit. There we go. That's the good sound. And we're going to go probably maybe 5-ish minutes. We'll check them after 2 or 3 and see if they're brown.
Tara, how do you know when your oil's quite hot enough? What's a good way to
I always drop something into it and see if it sizzles, basically. That's kind of my test. Of course, if you're deep frying, you might want to use like a proper thermometer. But yeah, you want that initial kind of sizzle and nothing just sitting there, not sizzling and sticking to the pan, basically. Sometimes you can go in with like a little bit of salt, and if the oil bubbles, it's hot. Speaking of which,
that's a great tip.
this would be a good time to salt your plantain. And like it's like potatoes, right? You always want that bit of salt to kind of draw out the flavor. So we're sizzling here. My pan
Is there
has
a way to
curve in
tell
the middle.
is there a way to tell when you have a good plantain and when it's not? Because I know that sometimes you get them and they're just perfect and beautiful when you fry them, and sometimes they're just so mealy and like.
Yeah, the greener they are, the more mealy they're going to be. The sugars haven't changed yet. So when the plantain ripens and turns yellows, the sugars are changing. So you probably know the green plantain, it's just doesn't really taste like much, right? But the yellow ones, they're sweet, right? So yeah.
So like a banana, essentially.
Pretty much, yeah. I personally don't like them if they're super soft. I find them hard to work with. But I do like, you know, kind of a couple black spots and a little bit of green maybe on the ends, but probably mostly yellow.
We've got a question in the chat, and it's just about how much oil should we use?
Depending on the size of your pan, start with like 2 tablespoons, maybe 3. I have probably 5 here and I've used about half of it. So just enough that it's not gonna stick, right? But we're not deep frying, right?
Right.
So they're getting there. My pan, all the oil wants to run to one side. And you just want a nice brown golden kiss on each side, we'll say. Plantain is like my love language, I swear. It's just so good.
It's so good. It's the food, it's the snack that I'll never say no to. If someone's cooking me something and it's got plantains in it, I will always eat it.
Yeah, and then it's like friends for life.
Yeah.
Like, I could see you again in 40 years and be like, yes, that time we ate the plantain. All right,
And
so
I'll
you're
just
probably
mention
looking.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you're probably getting a little golden brown on there. I'm going to go for a couple more minutes here. Yeah, I'll go probably another 2 minutes on that.
I was just going to say, for anyone who's curious, Tara and I are calling it plantain. And that's because Caribbean connections, people, we were talking about this earlier too. Anyone from the Caribbean typically calls it plantain, just because that's the accent from the Caribbean. It's called plantain. Most people from anywhere else call it plantain, just like it's spelled. So they're both right. Say it whichever way is more comfortable for you.
So funny story. So growing up here, well, first of all, I really didn't know what a plantain was, but what I knew about it was that it was called plantain. Then I moved to Vancouver and ended up working in a Caribbean restaurant. They're like, what are you saying? Like, that's, you know, like, it's like they take like offense to it or something, right? But it's just the accent, the pronunciation, right?
Yeah.
So now I call it plantain.
And it was the opposite for me, because I grew up with my Caribbean grandmother, and the only time I ever ate it was when she cooked it, or when someone from that side of the family or a friend of that side of the family cooked it. Right. So I grew up calling it plantain. And then the first time I heard people calling it plantain, I was like, what are you even saying?
Totally. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just called many different things. And then, of course, if you're in like an Afro-Latin part of the Caribbean, it's plantanos, right?
Yes. Yeah, plantanos.
Yeah, see, exactly, exactly. All right, so I've got these flipped over. And
When they're when they're ready, can you hold one up to the camera a little so we can see close up?
Yep.
Color?
Definitely. And I'm just gonna grab a bowl. I went a little adventurous with the oil. And I'm just gonna grab a little something to take a little bit out so I don't have to mess around.
What kind of oil did you use, Tara?
I'm using grapeseed oil. It's a super neutral oil with a low smoking point. I don't know if that views better. This is just President's Choice brand. It's a better version of like a canola or a vegetable oil. And yeah, it's just a very neutral oil, low smoking point, and it's flavorless, basically. Yeah.
And would you use that all the time when cooking plantains, or would you switch it up? Like I like to use coconut oil, especially if I'm cooking it for like breakfast.
Yeah, depending on what I'm going to use it for, I would probably, like if I'm making, if it's going in a curry or something like that, that coconut flavor is going to go with it. Yeah, I would totally go that route. Yeah. But this is generally my frying oil of choice. Just, it's easy, it's neutral. And for me, it's about the smoking point too. Mm-hmm. Like if I had coconut oil in here right now, it would probably be smoking.
Yeah.
And of course, olive oil is never the oil you want to cook anything with. Although I'm sure an Italian nonna would tell me otherwise, but it's to do with the smoking point. And when your oils start to smoke, it becomes rancid. And when you ingest the rancid oils, that turns into bad stuff in your body. So it's all about the smoking point. So I've got one of these guys here. And
oh, that looks beautiful.
Just lightly browned. And the other side's not quite as cooked. But that's okay. These are going to go back in to the stew at the end, so they're not going to be that crispy in the stew. So if you got some nice golden color on there, we can probably go ahead and take them out.
I just want to eat them just like that. Yes.
I know, totally. And yeah, as you were saying, just some chili powder and a little bit of salt. That's your, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome.
Sometimes we'll do sometimes we'll do like a little bit of brown sugar.
Yes.
Bring that sweetness out.
The Caribbean restaurant that I used to work at, we did a dry jerk seasoning. Like we'd make the jerk from scratch and then dry it out in the oven, like lay it flat on a baking sheet and make it into like a seasoning. And we would also take the wet jerk and mix it with a mayonnaise and make jerk mayonnaise to dip your jerked plantain chips in.
Sounds amazing.
Okay, I'm gonna set these over here. Okay, and I'll give you a close up. So just a light fry. I could have gone a little bit longer on them, but for the sake of time and your appetite, we're just gonna keep moving. So you can see a little bit. I've got probably about 2 tablespoons or so of oil left in here. And you know what? That's probably great for frying up the rest of our ingredients. So I'll just give you a second there to get situated. And if you haven't gone ahead and cut your onion yet, that will be your next step. We've just got kind of a small dice on the onion, but however you see fit, however you like to eat onion in a stew is totally suffice. And cooking with propane is always an adventure. Burner's going out. So I'm going to go ahead on this next step, but no rush for you all if you're still cutting up your onion. And if you are, you can also go ahead and mince up your garlic. Those are going to be the next two things that we go into the pan with.
Wendy says that Wendy and Ashlyn have sampled the plantains, and Ashlyn's a big fan already.
Oh, amazing. I'll go ahead and say that they're a great school snack. They travel well.
What's great about them is they're as simple as that. You could stop there and just have that little snack. And that's what I do sometimes if I just want to snack in the evenings. I'll just slice it, fry it, put it in a bowl, and then my husband and I will just snack on them instead of potato chips or pretzels or whatever.
All right, so we're just going to saute this onion until it's about translucent. You really don't want any color on it. Just nice and kind of clear around the edges. Love the smell of onions and garlic cooking.
Pretty much the best smell.
It's the best smell ever. It's just love language again, for sure.
Yep.
Probably 2 to 3 minutes on this, and then we'll go in with the garlic.
No, I'm always, whenever I fry onions and garlic, I never get the timing right. I always try to wait, and then I feel like maybe I just don't have everything else prepared enough. So I get the garlic in and I think it's the perfect timing, but then it always ends up being in there just a little too long, and it's always a little more cooked than I want it to be.
Got you. Yeah. It's a dance for sure. For sure. It's like sometimes your heat's too high and now your onions are brown, and now when do you add the garlic because the onions are already brown, right? Yeah. Or, vice versa. So we're going to go in with our minced garlic. I just did a pretty fine chop on here, but again, however you like your stew, you can cut it larger or what's the word I'm looking for? Like mash it. That's not the proper term, but I didn't learn that in culinary school.
I always say smashed, but I don't know if that's the proper term either.
Yeah, totally. It is now. It is. That's one thing for me. It's like, as a culinary school grad with a classical French cooking background, I love to break the rules, because the best food you're ever going to have is from someone's grandma who, grew up on a farm and cuts everything like in her hand with a paring knife. And that's proper in my mind.
Agreed.
Culinary school was good for the technique, but yeah, some of the best food I've had is just somebody's grandma or the cookout,
Yep.
All right, this is looking good. Nice, and onions are translucent, garlic's good. So the fun part next is we're going to go in with our spices. And we're just going to toast them probably for a minute or so. So we've got coriander, turmeric, ginger powder, and smoked paprika.
I can't believe I'm not home cooking this.
Should have put Mark up to task. All right, so we're going to go in with this. And the purpose of doing this in the dry pan is you want to toast the spices in the fat and just let that kind of bring out the oils in the.
We've got a question from the audience.
Yep.
How much of each spice? Is that listed on the recipe page?
It is, yep. And I realized that the coriander might be kind of confusing, the size of it. If you just do a heaping tablespoon of coriander, you should be good, or a little bit less than a heaping tablespoon. Then we've also got 2 teaspoons of the smoked paprika, half a teaspoon of the turmeric powder, and half a teaspoon of the ginger powder. All right, this is smelling good. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is deglaze the pan with just a little bit of water. And that's going to get up all the bits off the bottom of the pan and just kind of bring that flavor together. Sorry for the steam.
So you said 1 heaping tablespoon of coriander.
Yep.
Half a teaspoon of everything else?
Half a teaspoon of the ginger, the ground ginger, and the turmeric. And 2 teaspoons of the smoked paprika.
Okay.
And next, we're going to go in with the tomato. And if you're using the jalapeno, that's going to go in now as well. I've got a habanero here. And I'm not sure yet if I'm going to put this whole thing in. It's going to be spicy, but we'll see. So you can go in with your diced tomatoes and your jalapeno if you're using it. And you could totally substitute the jarred jalapeno here as well, or any pepper you like, or not. You can leave it out. And I chose fire roasted potatoes because of the char. It just gives it that extra layer of flavor and a bit of smokiness. So
Where do
we'll
you
go
get the
over
fire
tomato.
roasted tomatoes?
These I found at Superstore in the quote unquote healthy section.
Yeah.
I forget the brand. It's got a black label with pictures of the tomatoes on it. I don't recall the name of the brand. And just give that a good stir and let it go. And I don't think I'm going to be too adventurous today. I'm just going to use a little bit of this habanero. Habaneros are hotter than jalapenos. Jalapenos are probably the mildest pepper that has heat to it. You probably know the green, yellow, and red peppers, bell peppers, don't have any heat to them. But jalapeno would be a step up from that. And the habanero would be probably 2 steps above the jalapeno. And you can bring that up to a simmer. And I'm just going to add a smidge more water. And I'm just going to cover this for a minute or 2.
Now, will that water cook down
It
and
will,
thicken,
yeah.
or does it get
Yeah, and I'm
later, or
gonna
is
see what it
not
looks
thick?
like after I take the lid off and kind of see where my liquid is at, because we really don't have a whole lot of plantain to go in, so I don't want it to be too watery, but then again, I've got these black beans to go in as well, so
Right.
I don't want it to be too dry that it's just kind of a big lump of
Yeah.
stuff in the pot. How's everyone doing? Got your seasonings together?
We've got a thumbs up from Ashlyn and Wendy.
Awesome. Is it smelling good in your kitchens?
We've got a thumbs up from Sarah. Tanya,
Yes.
Stephen, how are you guys doing? Got a thumbs up. If you hit the space bar and hold it, I think that'll unmute you. Yes, you want to drain your black beans?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing great here. Really enjoying it. Just a couple of questions. It's kind of neat to be all doing this together. It's really quite an experience. It's
Awesome.
an appreciation
Yeah.
when you go to a restaurant. What's behind the dishes that you serve. That you're served in these really nice restaurants.
The smell is
Love it.
so good in here. Holy
Yay.
smokes.
Amazing.
Really nice. Yeah.
I love it.
And Tamara, while I'm unmuted, I want to thank you for everything you're doing for the BIPOC community and for putting this on. I think this is just fantastic. I just think it's so great to have a look into other people's cultures and members of our society that use different kitchen cuisines and it's just a great education.
Thank
First
you.
time I ever even saw a plantain. So
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Well,
Oh,
I
I'm
bet
so
you're really gonna
grateful I
like
could be here for this.
Well, Chef Tara's a pro at just kind of sharing her love for food and her love for cooking. So you really couldn't have a better person doing this with you today.
Exactly. Beautiful. So we put everything in now? Everything goes in now?
Yep.
Chef Tara?
The next thing we're going to go in with is the black beans,
Black beans.
and then we're going to follow with the plantain. But I just want to see what the liquid content is looking like in this.
what about the onions? Ask her, do the onions go back in
Did
there?
the onions go back in that as well?
Yep. Onions are in the pan. Yep. So the only things you really should have left for your ingredients will be the plantain, the black beans, and the cilantro, and your salt and pepper.
Cilantro, okay.
Coriander.
Dublin.
Which are here, I think. I didn't get any fresh stuff.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Smelling good. It's looking good. So next I'm going to go in with the black beans, and they've been drained out of their can and rinsed off. However, if you do choose to use the bean liquid, it's going to give you some nice kind of body to the recipe, as opposed to just using straight water, because it has that starch content in it from the beans sitting in it for so long. And so it's always interesting to see when people do or do not use the bean water, right? Some cultures, just probably Mexican cultures, like of course you use the bean water, and then you add your seasonings, your onions, garlic, and cook it that way. But for this recipe, we've just got some drained and rinsed black beans. So we're going to keep that on a simmer.
When you got it on a
And
simmer,
then
you want it to be bubbling just a little.
Just a smidge, yeah. I don't know if you can see just kind of in the middle here. Not a rolling boil, but not a still pan either. Just
Yeah,
a
if
little
anyone's
something
to move it around a little. If anyone's wondering, you can really see just a beautiful simmer there if you look at the camera with the pot.
Yeah, just some light bubbling. And we also don't want too much of that liquid to evaporate either, right? So just something to bring those flavors all together and get the beans warmed up, bring them up to the same temperature as the rest of the ingredients. And next, I'm going to go in with the plantain that we had fried up. Oh, so good. One last shot. And if you want, you can cut these in half, you know, just depending on how much of a bite you want. You could totally just cut these in half and make them like a half moon shape, whatever you prefer. And I know for some people, if this is your first time eating it, you might not want to eat a big chunk of it, but I promise you probably won't be disappointed if you do. All right, so I'm simmering a little harder than I'd like to here, so I'm just going to turn my heat down just a smidge, and we're just going to stir this plantain into here.
I wish I had one of those cameras on everybody's pot.
Yeah, I know, totally, right? Totally. I'd love to see what you guys are working with.
Ooh, I think we're gonna get a shot of Mayor Ogden's soup. Oh, very nice.
Looks
That
great.
looks delicious.
Yes,
In
yes,
go
it
the
has
plantains.
plantains.
Yes.
Love it. All right, so same thing again. You just want to keep that on a bit of a simmer to bring the plantain up to temperature with the rest of what's in the pan and kind of bring that flavor together. And there's a little bit more liquid in here than I'd like, but that's totally fine. The plantain, as it sits, the plantain is gonna soak up a little bit of that liquid. And I find with anything like this, especially tomato-based, it's always gonna taste better the next day, once the ingredients have time to just kind of sit and hang out together. This is also probably a great time to add your salt and your pepper. And one thing I will say with using tomato like this is you might need to go a little bit heavier on your salt than normal. I find just the acidity of tomatoes in this capacity can be a little bit intense. And a good amount of salt will kind of settle that down. And if you find it's still too acidic for your taste, you could even go ahead and add a little bit of sugar to it, or maple syrup or something like that, just to cut that acidity. And we're looking good. And our last step for this is going to be adding some cilantro. And I think I've got 2 tablespoons on the recipe there. But if you're like me and you absolutely love cilantro, feel free to freestyle and add however much you like. It's a nice accent to what we've got going on in the pan here. And you can just do kind of a fine chop on the cilantro. Stems are totally okay. And one of the ways I love to cut cilantro is to bundle it up so that you've got control of it. This would be the first step to a chiffonade cut. You would normally see this with basil. You stack all the leaves, roll it up, and then slice it really thin. But this is probably the best way to work with something like this because you've got a bundle in your fingers and it's not everywhere and your knife is chasing it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and shred this a little bit. Feel free to cut it as fine or as rough as you like. And the idea with this stew, it's rustic, right? It's not anything fancy. It's more about the flavor and the experience of just using a new ingredient. And we'll add that into the pan.
So pretty.
Yeah, nice colors, eh? And that's going to round out this recipe. That's the last ingredient to go in. And if you like, if you're feeling fancy with your presentation, you could go ahead and put a nice cilantro leaf as garnish on your bowl of plantain and black bean stew. And again, feel free to add more cilantro in there if you like, and to adjust the acidity with the tomato.
So now how long after you put the herbs in should you let it simmer?
A minute, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll get the freshness of the cilantro, but it'll mellow out probably the next day. And we really don't need to cook it. We want to kind of preserve the freshness of it. So, and all of the other ingredients in the dish are cooked already. So it's kind of the last thing to go in, and then you can just cut the heat.
Steven says it tastes great. Oh, and it looks like it does. Oh my gosh. Can't believe I'm not eating this.
Oh, wow. That's a good one. I'm going to go a little bit more salt. And I'm so
What's your
glad I
spice
didn't put
level
that
with that amount of habanero that you put in?
It was perfect. I can feel it just barely in the back of my throat. And that's as much spice as I need for this.
Nice.
Perfect.
Oh, everybody's tasting. I'm seeing some spoons. I'm seeing some
Yes.
spoons.
Let us know.
Let us know how it turned out.
Bon appetit. Thank you very much.
Yes, my pleasure.
Oh, that looks amazing.
It's absolutely delicious.
Sarah says it's
Yay.
so good.
Oh, awesome.
Get a thumbs up
Amazing.
from
And
Wendy,
this,
Ashlyn.
Mm.
love it. You could put this over rice if you like, or
Very tasty.
something of that sort. And
What's this called?
What is this called, Tamara? What's the name of the
it's
recipe?
plantain and black bean stew.
Oh, wow. It's really
Simple.
tasty. It's really, it tastes like a meal in itself. But you say you put it over rice usually, or do you usually
You
eat it?
can. Yep, you totally could. Like as you would have a chili, you could totally put it right over rice.
Wow,
So good.
it's delicious, just like this. Yeah,
Oh, amazing. How do you like the plantain?
I love it.
it.
I love it. Yeah,
Wow,
beautiful.
that's not at all what I thought it was going to taste like.
Right, right. Can you taste a little bit of sweetness to it?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and it's kind of the same texture as a potato, right?
Yeah, no, I couldn't get banana out of my mind, but
Right.
it's just
Quite
so
different, yeah.
tasty. Yeah, that's delicious. What a great idea this was.
Yay.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing.
Great.
Yeah, thank you
Love
so
it.
much for doing this.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
pleasure. Thanks to this town of Stratford for having me. This was super fun. My pleasure.
It's a great recipe.
So I think that concludes my portion of this event. If there's any quick questions about anything, I'm happy to answer anything, but otherwise I'll throw it back to Wendy. And
Thank you. Thanks for that. That's great. I just have to add in too. So most of these ingredients, probably all of them actually, Ashlyn was like, "Ugh." And as it was cooking,
Right.
she kept going, it smells really good. It smells really good. And she's over here eating it. Like if I had just made this, there's
Oh,
no
I
way
love
she
it.
could have eaten it. So that's awesome.
Amazing. And for me, that's why I do what I do, right? It's like we took a bunch of random ingredients with a virtual room full of strangers, right? And came together and made an amazing meal out of things that maybe you wouldn't want to eat separately, but I love it.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm
Sarah
going to
sends
throw
a
it
big
over to
thank you
Wendy.
to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
And I'd like to thank everyone as well. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this, and it was just a great experience. And thank you, Tamara, and everyone and Chef for introducing me to your culture and to your cuisine. It's wonderful. I love it.
That's
My
right.
Thank you very
pleasure.
much.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. So we're going to kind of move to the second portion here for the next few minutes or whatever, because we do have another event, as I mentioned earlier. Black Cultural Society has another event, not the town directly, but we do have a few minutes, and we thought we'd just I'll throw it over to you, Tamara, here in a second, but just have a bit of a discussion. I know Tamara has some ideas of some learning materials, books, and or podcasts that she might share with us. It's also a time for Q&A. So if anyone has some questions that they'd like to ask or some sharing, We're kind of have a bit of an open space here for the next few minutes before we finish up, and happy to do that. So Tamara, I'll let you maybe introduce yourself and the organization to those that aren't as familiar, and we'll go from there.
Sure thing. So yeah, I'm Tamara Steele, Executive Director for the Black Cultural Society of PEI. So we've been in existence since 2016 as a not-for-profit cooperative. And in 2021, just over a year ago, we became a registered not-for-profit, and we did about an 8-month strategic planning exercise where we really moved the organization from an organization that raises awareness of Black culture to an organization that really functions to support the Black community here, because we recognized that the community was growing, getting larger, the Black community itself was becoming more diverse, and we wanted to make sure that we realized the community was growing, but we also recognized that people were coming here, staying for a little while, and then leaving because there's a lack of resources for them or for us. And we wanted to try to alleviate some of that. And knowing that some people would move here maybe for school or with family, and hearing things like, we really want to stay, but we can't find a job, and housing is really hard to come by, but we can't get our hair done, different things like that. So we wanted to, we can't find the food we want to eat here, that sort of thing. So we wanted to, we thought it was time that there was an organization that supported the Black community in different ways than just letting people know that we're here. So this is the new iteration, the newest iteration of the organization is where we are now. We've been like this, like I said, for just over a year, as with me as the executive director. We've got a really great board who governs the organization. And we've got our hands in a lot of different pots. So we work with the Department of Education and with the Public School Board, and we work with the provincial government, and we've worked with the city on a couple things, and we get asked to consult on a lot of project and program development, and just to make sure where people are being more conscious now of being inclusive and trying to make their programs more equitable. They will tend to consult us a lot on the development of those projects. So we're really happy to do that. We love having those conversations. But in addition to that, we're also really making moves to provide things or advocate for things, for services that the Black community needs, such as mental health services. Right now, we're developing a peer support program that the Black community will be able to access as an intermediary step between having nothing at all and having access to professional mental health services, culturally appropriate mental health services. We just are wrapping up a business grant program. It was a pandemic relief micro grant program for Black-owned businesses. That was hugely successful, and we're working on plans to be able to provide more grants, more funding opportunities for Black-owned businesses, and incubation, business services. We've partnered with Black Business Initiative out of Halifax. We've got other opportunities to partner with other business service providers, and we've got working on programs to support artists, and there's a lot of things we're working on, supporting youth activities. So we're kind of in a place where we're growing our organization in an effort to grow and develop the Black community. So we're really doing a lot of community, listening to community feedback so we can inform our programs that way. So that's what we do. And one of the things I love, oh yes, and Sarah, sorry, Wendy put up a link here. Sarah, I just assumed it's you because I'm used to working this way with you. So, Wendy put up a link to our website in the chat. You can see that there. A link to Tara Reeves, Chef Tara's website as well, and also noted that we have a business directory for Black businesses on our website as well that you can access if you're looking for any services really or products. It's a great way to just diversify your spending and support diverse communities. So that's a bit about us in a nutshell. And one of my favorite things to do is to really just engage with community, engage with all communities, and answer questions that anyone might have about anything really. I'm, like I was saying to Wendy, I'm the person that when people have the questions that they consider dumb or might be kind of embarrassed to ask, like I'm so happy to answer those. So if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I do have a few book recommendations and can come up with some podcast recommendations pretty quick because I listen to a lot of them. So I'll leave it open for a few minutes if anyone has any questions.
Tamara, is there still an opportunity for anyone to sign up for the 7 o'clock session if I share a link, or have you cut off?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to share a link.
I don't think there was a cutoff. You can certainly sign up.
Perfect.
At 7 o'clock, we're doing a Q&A with the Human Rights Commission. So that'll be an opportunity for anyone to ask questions of the Human Rights Commission about their functionality and their services, and just a way to kind of introduce the community to the Human Rights Commission and vice versa. So yeah, we'll share. Yep, there's the Eventbrite link there. You should still be able to register if you wanted to. That'll be about an hour and a half at the most, I would think, depending on, I know we have a number of people registered, so depending on the questions we get. Yeah, okay. So I have a couple of book recommendations that I'll give you. I love to read, so I'm just getting them out here. So a couple of books that I've read in the last little while that I really, really enjoyed and I thought were really informative. And I try to read, I know when people are looking for information, when people are trying to, I'll say, educate themselves, I find a lot of the information people find is actually American content. And I really try to focus my reading on Canadian content about Canadian Black history and the development of Black communities in Canada specifically. So my recommendations stem from that interest of mine. So one book that I really loved, and I did share this on our page last month for Black History Month on our social media channels, is called They Call Me George, The Untold Story of the Black Train Porters. I'll read the description here quickly. It says, a historical work of nonfiction that chronicles the little-known stories of Black railway porters, the so-called pullmen of the Canadian rail lines. The actions and spirit of these men helped define Canada as a nation in surprising ways, affecting race relations, human rights, North American multiculturalism, community building, the shape and structure of unions, and the nature of travel and business across the US and Canada. Drawing on the stories and legends of several of these influential early Black Canadians, this book narrates the history of a very visible but rarely considered aspect of Black life in railway age Canada. These porters who fought against the idea of Canada as white man's country, open only to immigrants from Europe, fought for and won a Canada that would provide opportunities for all its citizens. This book I love because I went in to this book with the expectation of learning about the train porters, about the railway porters, and knowing that most of the train porters back in railway age Canada were Black men, I thought it'd just be interesting to know that story. I heard a little bit about it and thought I just want to know a bit more about that story, but I came out with so much more than I went in looking for. It was just such a great analysis of just all the things that I just read in the description. You went in looking for the story of the train porters. You came out with a story of how unions were developed, of how you know, like they said, transportation from the United States to Canada, and how those collaborations and partnerships were developed with railway worker unions in the States supporting worker unions in Canada, and just like so much more. It's a really great history almost of of the development of Black workers in Canada. And it was really impressive. I didn't expect to get that much out of it. So highly recommend that read. And another one that was along the same lines, where I went in for one story and came out with many more, was called Policing Black Lives: State Violence in Canada from Slavery to the Present. And that book is by Robin Maynard. Sorry, I didn't tell you who They Call Me George was by. They Call Me George is by an author named Cecil Foster. And I should put this in the chat. And policing, let me just do this really quickly. I'll pop this in the chat. Actually, I'm going to pop the link to the Goodreads in there, and then you can just kind of see that for yourself. And then the second book I wanted to recommend is called Policing Black Lives, like I said, State Violence in Canada from Slavery to Present. And this book has a bit of a longer description, so I won't read too much of it, but I loved this book for the same reason as I loved They Call Me George. I went in looking for a story of just the history of policing, maybe a description of how policing evolved in Canada, policing Black lives specifically. And I came out with so much more. So while it says here, I'm pulling from the description, delving behind Canada's veneer of multiculturalism and tolerance, Policing Black Lives traces the violent realities of anti-Blackness from the slave ships to prisons, classrooms, and beyond. She provides the first comprehensive account of nearly 400 years of state-sanctioned surveillance, criminalization, and punishment of Black lives in Canada. While highlighting the ubiquity of Black resistance, this book traces still living legacy of slavery across multiple institutions, shedding light on the state's role in perpetuating contemporary Black poverty and unemployment, racial profiling, law enforcement violence, incarceration, immigration detention, deportation, exploitative migrant labor practices, disproportionate child removal, and low graduation rates. I mean, the description is longer than that, but that's as much as I'll read. But like you can see from that list, there's so many stories in there, and it's just such an eye-opening account of what's really happening when we talk about systemic racism. It's a very eye-opening account of what's really happening behind the scenes that is really and genuinely and truly systemic. So if it's not affecting you, you don't see it. So that's I highly recommend if you are interested in just getting a better understanding of what we're talking about when we're talking about systemic racism, what we mean when we say the system wasn't designed for us. This book is the book that's going to explain that to you. So I will pop the link to that in the chat as well.
You okay there?
And I'm going to give a couple podcast recommendations. These are, I should give a couple recommendations for younger audiences. Do we want to do that, Wendy?
That's totally up to you. I mean, I'm kind of in the minority here with Ashlyn, so I can just carry on with the podcast. And
okay, I'll do a couple podcasts, and if you want some recommendations, I do have a little list I can send to you.
that would be awesome. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm just going to go through my library of podcasts that I listen to, and one that I'll recommend that isn't kind of anti-racism specific is called The Secret Life of Canada, and I like this podcast because it explains in kind of short chunks lots of different bits about Canada's history that people don't often consider. So there's a lot of information. There's a number of episodes on the history of the treatment of Indigenous people, the history of the treatment of Black people, of other minoritized folks, and also just other things, like finding historical figures that people think are great and kind of, why is his name escaping me? The one that we threw the paint on the statue, McDonald. What's his name?
John A.
John A.
John A. McDonald.
I couldn't think of his name. I don't know why. John A. McDonald, they talk about him. So there's a few different figures that they'll kind of delve into. There's stories that aren't told so often, and history of the Hudson Bay Company. It's a really great look at kind of what's really going on behind the scenes in Canada, or what has been in the past, and I think that's a great one. Another one that I really like is called Loyalist Connections. This one is, so I don't know how many people are familiar with the history of Black people in Canada. Oftentimes when you talk about the history of Black Canadians or Black Canadians in the Maritimes, we talk about the Black Loyalists. A lot of us would be descended from Black Loyalists who came here after the Revolutionary War in the States. They moved here. They were told, if you fight for our country, then we'll give you land. For the States, we'll move you and give you some land and give you this and this and that, and not kind of keeping up on those promises, but we'll give you freedom and we'll give you land. So that's how a lot of Black people ended up in Canada. So this podcast, Loyalist Connections, I listen to it on Apple Podcasts. It's probably on other platforms as well. It's a history of like different Black Canadian communities, different the history of the Loyalists, that telling that whole story, and Loyalist Connections. So we're talking about the story of the Loyalists, but also what happened beyond that, the land that they got, the communities that were developed, and what happened to those communities, and all of that. So, and it's specifically about Canadians in the Maritimes. So Black Canadians in the Maritimes. So I think that's a really great podcast to get some history, to get some knowledge about this part of the country and the history of Black people here. And I also love it because their accents are just like so maritime and just like so like Black maritime Canadian, and I just like, it just feels like home to me when I listen to it. Side note. So yeah, those would be there's also one called Black in the Maritimes. I think that's really relevant. It talks about Black Maritimes today. So it's talking to a lot of Black Maritimers and just talking about the experience of being a Black Canadian, and it's just really relevant because it's contemporary to educate ourselves on, or historical, but sometimes it's missed. The current experience is often or sometimes missed. So I think this is a really good, Black in the Maritimes is a good podcast to explore that current contemporary experience of Black Canadians, specifically in the Maritimes. So those would be my podcast recommendations. Black in the Maritimes, Loyalist Connections, and The Secret Life of Canada. I think we're running short of time and I need to start another event. And we've got another book recommendation from Sarah. She says she's reading now Where Beauty Survived, an Africadian memoir by George Eliot Clark. Incredible history in that book, she says. I would second that. I haven't read it, but I love anything by George Eliot Clark. So I highly recommend for sure. And Black Islanders. That's a classic. That's not in print anymore. But if you can get your hands on a copy, tells the story of PEI Black history. So it's written by Jim Hornby. It tells the story of Black Islanders that lived in the bog in the 19th century. So 19th century PEI Black history. I have that on my shelf as well out there. So yeah, are there any questions or anything before we wrap up? Oh, Tara, you have a book recommendation, don't you? Oh, you're still on mute. There you go.
Sorry, I got so many devices here. Definitely the Black Islanders. And this, it's an African-American author. But if you're curious to learn more about food similar to what we cooked here today, this is an amazing book. It's called Black Food by Bryant. He's an African-American vegan chef. And this book is just phenomenal. There's stories. It's a compilation of stories, recipes, and a playlist that was compiled by all of the contributors to the book. And there's all kinds of different recipes from all over the African diaspora. And it's just one of those books. It can be a coffee table book. It can be a recipe book. You can go through the playlist. And I mean, it's everything from jazz to Nina Simone to contemporary music and just the history, right? So definitely recommended reading. And it's such a, oh, look, another reason why you should read it. Plantain. So again, that's another way you can serve plantain. So those would be sliced on a mandolin, really thin, the entire length of the plantain. But again, it's that staple ingredient, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my two recommendations.
Thank you. Okay, how are we feeling?
Just amazed, and I'm just totally so glad that I was able to take part in this. I really appreciate all the information that you've given us and the recommendations for books. I know I'm especially interested in the one about the porters, the railway porters. And my father was a railway man. He was an engineer on the railroad, and I used to ride the trains a lot. And I recall meeting porters, and they were so strong and so just a really great role models in terms of just their appearance and being able to endure what they endured to to reach the point that people are today. And I just wanted to say that this diversity of our society, it makes everyone so much stronger. It makes our society so much more interesting, and it brings us so much closer together to be able to feel that we're all connected. We all have interdependencies, and we all have to treat everyone equally. And I really I really appreciated some of the recommendations you made about the past, because in order to see where we're going, you have to know where you've been, and really I don't like where we were. And I think we have the opportunity in this generation to really chart a new path, and to be able to make a future for all of us that is based on equality, and is based on respect, and is based on a love for each other, a real understanding. And I think by understanding each other's cultures and everyone's approaches to things like cuisine, which is really, really good, but there's other deeper parts to this that go back dozens of generations, and it brings us, and in that insight, it goes a long way towards creating understanding and creating I'm going to be cooking more of this kind of food in the future, because I love it. And it's just something that I think is inspiring, and it is something that really I'm so pleased and so glad and so lucky to have been able to take part in this. And I owe you a great debt of gratitude, Tamara, for all you're doing to bring us on that journey, and to create that critical mass for your community, for all of our community, but for the Black community. So, as you said, you have your own mental health needs. You have your own needs and that are different than the traditional white society's approaches. And for me personally, I really need to understand all of those differences, and really make sure that we in Stratford are able to bring whatever programs and services that we bring forward, that we include everyone, every community, including the Black community, and their needs and their different approaches, and really respect that and integrate it into our overall approach, because I really think that it's important that we all have a part to play, and it'd be nice to have some Black members on council, and maybe a Black candidate will run against me and win the mayor's job, and I really think that's a distinct possibility if we keep building this generation's approach is so different than my generation, and I'm just so pleased that it's going this way, and that we're mapping this future that is so much more inclusive and so much more respectful, and hopefully we can get at. I see it as a sea change that there's still vestiges of the old tide that has to drain away, but people like you, Tamara, you're helping do that, and your organization, you're helping to drain away those vestiges of bigotry and racism, and I really appreciate it. So thank you very much for everything you're doing.
Thank you. That was really nice.
Well, it's from the heart. I really mean it. I really do mean it. Sometimes when I think about what happened in the past, it actually moves me to tears. I really feel so terrible for what people endured in the past, especially the Black people.
Well, we all do, and I love my job, and I love what I do, and I find it all very fulfilling, and happy to be here to do it. So thank you for your kind words and for your allyship, and Wendy, thank you for reaching out about this event. This is really fun.
I look forward to future partnerships as well with both of you and Tara, and everyone, and appreciate everyone being here today. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of their evening, and for those jumping on to the other call, we'll see you there.
Great. Nice to see you, Tara.
Thanks, everyone. You too. Have a great night.
You too.
Take care.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you.
Thanks.